Okay, now I would like to talk about the second concept in this lesson, which is talking about why do we need to teach international mindedness. So we talked about what is an international mindedness previously in part one, but now I want to talk about why do we need to teach international mindedness to our students for them to be successful in the 21st century. So I'd like to start with this photo image that I took while I took a trip from Los Angeles to JEJU a few weeks ago. And the flight itself is about 14 hours long. We stopped by Honolulu briefly, but I was thinking about this lesson that I was going to deliver, and looking at the screen as I was inside the plane and looking at the world map. We are in a very flat world, in a way, literally, when you look at a computer screen. 14 hours, so you're going from one culture in the United States to Korea in 14 hours. So you can basically travel, obviously, at this day and age, to any part of the world within a day or so. Why do we need to teach international mindedness? It's a different world now. And our children are growing up in a different world. And we talked about globalization in the first part, the process by which different parts of the world interact politically, economically, and culturally. So because of globalization, we must teach students to be internationally minded. So this is one of the reasons why we have to do this. So long time ago, obviously, when you are trying to do a business, carry out a business with another person and so on, because we did not have the technology available, you had to actually physically meet another individual to carry out an interaction, whether it's a business interaction or personal interaction and so on. But now, the digital age have brought us that it's not necessary to physically be next to another person in order to communicate or to do a business deal and so on. We can basically do it from our own living room. So this is one reason why we need to teach our students to be internationally minded. The second reason why is that we have emerging technologies. Emerging technologies will increase interconnectedness. So here we go again with that word, interconnectedness between nations. So all of our countries, all of our nations are now connected, whether it's digital technology or some other means, but we are all connected. So next century will bring us, or this century will bring us artificial intelligence, things like 5G, and I know that 5G is a very important technology innovation that's going to impact the world. And AI, if you want to learn a little bit more about what AIs are, obviously you can click this link here and then learn a little bit about that. Same thing with 5G. People are saying that AI and 5G will drastically transform our lives in the next 10, 20 years. So I'm really excited about living in a world where this type of innovation and creativity is taking place. So this is another very, very important reason why we need to teach international mindedness to students in our schools. The third idea is to embrace multiculturalism and diversity. So this is a very important concept, multiculturalism. So again, multiculturalism means that you have more than one culture within you. So not only thinking about yourself, your own culture, but thinking about other person's culture. And again, if you are able to learn the second language or third language, you will be able to have that multiculturalism. When once again, just personally, the fact that I went to the United States when I was little and being able to embrace that culture, I like to think of myself as a Korean American having multiculturalism. And then the concept of diversity. This is a very important concept this day and age. This is one of those global issues that I talked about before when I was talking about migration. So in our Korean culture right now, in the last 10, 15 years, there's been a lot of mixed marriages. So Koreans marrying other non-Koreans. And that's perfectly okay, obviously. But we need to embrace that that diversity. And talking about refugees and coming into the country, I think we do need to embrace that. And some people might disagree with that. That we should be not allowing other cultures and other diverse people to come into our society and so on. But I happen to disagree with that. And if you are an international mindedness type of individual, you must be able to embrace that diversity. So we need to appreciate different beliefs, values, attitudes, and behaviors. So for example, I'd like to talk a little bit about an example that just happened recently in America. I think this happened about a week ago or so when on CNN I saw this news about a student, high school student, having an interaction with a Native American. And this became a very controversial news in the United States a couple of weeks ago. And there was a lot of conversation about, again, respecting other cultures and so on. So this type of thing is happening all the time in the United States. Same thing in Europe. I know that in France, there's been some issues there as well in terms of migrant workers and so on. And also same thing here in Korea in terms of embracing diversity. So it goes back to that concept of cultural iceberg. We talk about the visible part of the cultural iceberg, and then there are things that are not visible. So these are beliefs, values, and attitudes. These are not visible to our eyes, but we need to appreciate the difference between us and other people who have different backgrounds and different cultures. The fourth concept is to make progress toward a more peaceful and sustainable world. And if we're going to have internationally minded students, then these students must be able to think about what are some global issues that are out there and how I can contribute and so on. So back in 2015, actually, United Nations supported this very, very important meeting called World Education Forum in Incheon, and it happened here in Korea back in 2015. So all the world leaders got together in Incheon and came up with 17 ideas, 17 goals called Sustainable Development Goals. And once again, if you want to learn a little bit more about these development goals, you can click this URL and learn a little bit more about them. But basically, what they came up with are 17 different development goals that are facing the humanity right now, and that we should be worried, but also at the same time start to solve some of these issues. So for example, we talked about the poverty, quality education, because there are millions and millions of students around the world that are not getting education that they deserve. I am very fortunate, and all the students here at our school are very fortunate to be in an environment like this, getting a great education. But there are millions, actually billions of students out there that are not getting the education that they deserve. So these are some of the things that they came up with. Gender equality is another issue in the United States as well as in Korea. Energy, water, obviously very, very important. And peace and justice that we talked about before. So these are all the different types of development goals that the United Nations and all world leaders came up with. And hopefully in the next 10, 20, 30 years that we will start making progress with all these different types of issues around the world. And there's actually another a video that, if you are very interested, it talks about, even though it's been about 3-4 years since this meeting occurred, there's a nice video that talks about the progress that we have made in the last 3 years and where are we in terms of making progress with these things. So if you're quite interested in learning more about them, you can also click on this video here. The next one is called multilingualism. Once again, we talked about that. That's you're able to speak more than one language. That will allow us to develop intercultural understanding and respect. So, we're talking about why international mindedness is important. So, if you are able to speak the second language or third language or even fourth language, then it's going to allow you to develop that intercultural understanding and respect for other people who have other background. So language and culture are closely connected, as I said before, and foreign language skill improve one's understanding of cultural differences. So it's very, very important that if you have the opportunity to learn the second language or third language, please, you should do that, definitely. The sixth idea is called global engagement, and I talked briefly about this previously, but global engagement will impact how we solve global issues. So we encourage students in our school to be globally engaged. So not only here in local JEJU area, but also outside of JEJU area. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later during this presentation. But when we do things like that, obviously the experience and learn the unfamiliar. So we want students to go into an environment where they feel unfamiliar or even uncomfortable. I think that's very, very important, that students are placed in an environment where they're uncomfortable, but they need to be able to think critically and be able to solve issues on their own and so on. So that's all part of a very important international mindedness education that we try to provide. Reflect on home culture in a new way. When you learn different cultures, sometimes you learn more about yourself, about your own culture and your beliefs and attitudes and values. So I think it's very, very important that we do that as well. And then finally, increase opportunities for yourself. So if you are internationally minded students, it's going to open a lot of doors for you in the future because you've been exposed to different cultures and ideas and beliefs and so on. So now we're going to go on to the third and final lesson objective, which is the promoting and integrating international mindedness in schools. So during this segment of the lesson, I'm going to just share with you some of the personal experiences that I've had in the past 32 years as an educator. So once again, international baccalaureate programs to develop internationally minded people who, recognizing their common humanity and shared guardianship of the planet, help to create a better and more peaceful world. So what are some examples that I have seen as a teacher in my schools? So these are the type of things that we want to encourage our students to be able to have as their own characteristics. So this is a great concept from IBO. And once again, if you want to learn more about this, you can click the link here. But these are 10 characteristics that we expect our students to have during their education in schools. So being reflective, balanced, knowledgeable, open-minded, inquirers, risk-takers, communicators, principled, caring, and thinkers. So these are all 10 characteristics that if you have these attributes, I believe that you are an internationally minded student. So think about these things, read about them to have a better understanding of what they are. So when I was a principal at Walter Panas High School in New York, we had a club called Inter-Ethnic Club. Basically, it embraces different type of diversity, different cultures and traditions and so on. And we met every week, and students had a meeting, but also celebrating different diversity and so on. So we had a performance, a musical performance for students as well as for the faculty and teachers and the community members and so on. And also celebrating things. Like in the United States, they don't celebrate Lunar New Year's Day. But in Asian culture, we do celebrate that. So in our school, we had some little kids that came to our school and we celebrated Lunar New Year's and we shared this experience with the Americans. And obviously, they really appreciated that type of sharing. And it was a great experience for both the students as well as the school community. Okay? But I do have to say that international mindedness is more than just food, flags, and festivals. And it's commonly referred to as 3 Fs. And we need to go beyond just eating foods that's different or celebrating, having a festival, or displaying flags in the building. So we need to do more than that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So when I was a principal at Dobbs Ferry High School in New York, we decided one year to read this particular book, and it was called 3 Cups of Tea. And basically, it's a book that came out a number of years ago, and it talks about an individual who went to Pakistan and learned a great deal about the culture there. And basically, the reason why it's called the 3 Cups of Tea is that in terms of their culture in Pakistan, the first time you share a tea with a Balti, and that's a Pakistani, you are a stranger. Okay? However, when you share the second time that you take tea with that person, then you are an honored guest. And then the third time you share a cup of tea, you become their family. Now, this is a culture that I wasn't very familiar with. And it's a very important concept, obviously. And we wanted to share this idea amongst the school community. So for all the way from elementary school to high school, all the teachers and also some community members in the community, we decided that one year, at the very beginning of the year, that everybody will get a copy of this book, the 3 Cups of Tea, and we started reading about it, and we started learning about the different cultures that we may not be familiar with. So we decided to do this, and it was a great experience for the entire school community. And that international mindedness became part of the school. Another example that I'd like to share with you is bringing in, actually, because obviously our students, we are not going to be able to take our students to Africa because that would be quite difficult to do. So we decided that one year, we decided to bring our African culture to our building by inviting African drumming performance group. And they came to our school and they spent the entire day not only performing for our students and interacting with our students, but also sharing with our school community about their cultures and how their belief system and their value system and so on. And although there are a lot of differences between African culture and American culture, what we all realized at the end was that there are way more common things that brings us together as human beings. So more common things than the differences. So, and I think that's a very important lesson that we need to teach our young students. And then here's some other examples. If you remember from the previous part 1 slides, we talked about the 4 C's. I hope you remember the 4 C's that I talked about. And one of those 4 C's was about collaboration. And collaboration, again, it does not mean that you have to go outside of the country to have that experience. Collaboration takes place every single day in a school environment. And here's a great example of a collaboration that I'm so proud of the students that we had at Walter Panis High School. So these students are part of a club called the Mental Health Club, and they call themselves Warriors. And basically, it was a club started by the students, and you can see all different types of diverse backgrounds. You have some African Americans, you have Spanish students, you have some Americans, and so on. And so they came together and they collaborated, and they were able to create this club to bring more awareness about mental health issues in the school and the school community. So it was a great opportunity for them to experience that collaboration amongst themselves. And again, that concept of thinking globally but acting locally. So the most important thing that our students must do is that they need to make a difference here first, locally, before thinking about going outside. I talked about empathy before, the importance of that. So here's an example of what we did. I invited a Holocaust from Germany, a Jewish individual who survived the Holocaust during the Second World War. And she came to our school and shared her experience when she was a child going through Second World War and so on. And at the end of her talk, some of our students came up and gave her a big hug, and some of them were actually in tears, crying after hearing her story about the horrors of the Second World War and the Holocaust. And again, that empathy, we wanted students to feel what she felt. Obviously, it's not going to be the same, but we want them to have some experience of feeling that empathy towards people who went through that type of tragic experience. And global engagement. We talked about global engagement before, once again. So this is an example of global engagement that our students here at NLCS JEJU have experienced. So one time, I believe last year, they went to Cambodia and to help the community there to drill water holes so that people could have fresh water and so on. So that was a great experience for our students and our teachers who went there to be globally engaged. Another example of global engagement is just recently, over the last holiday break, a number of our students went to Nepal, and they went to a school there, elementary school, where they connected with the students and they gave different types of lessons to students. So this not only benefited the students in Nepal, but I think more importantly, it also benefited the students here at NLCS JEJU, for them to be able to experience the other culture and being able to do that service for others. And then also technology. We talked about technology before, and using technology, basically you can connect with anyone around the world. So at Walter Panis High School, we were able to use, obviously Skype is one way of doing that, and we were able to connect with another individual halfway around the world. And in this classroom, they were talking about a certain topic with a professional from other part. I think this was South Africa that we were talking to. So this is New York and then South Africa. So imagine that. So the technology allows us to connect with others. And when the 5G, they're saying that when 5G becomes more widespread, they say that this type of interaction is going to be much, much easier. So we're all looking forward to seeing that happen in the future. Talking about multilingualism, I mentioned multilingualism before. And again, it's not just about celebrating festivals and flags and foods, but also really experiencing different cultures and different traditions and so on. So here, this is an example of some of our students here at NLCS JEJU. These are elementary students, and basically, obviously, they all speak English in our school. And this is a lesson that some of our teachers did. It was Romans versus Greeks. And they did a simulation of a battle between Romans and Greeks war. And that they learned about the different culture and history and so on, obviously using English and so on. So this is, again, an example of multilingualism. And then creating a more sustainable world. We talked about this before. Remember the 17 different types of development goals that in 2015 we came up with in Incheon. And again, we want to create that sustainable world. And here's an example of one of our students who, all by herself basically, along with some of her peers, raised some money to help do a conservation effort with the local forest, Gochawar forest. So that's an example of think globally but acting locally. So that's a very important thing that she did. This is an example, a photo of my previous school in New York, where students once again contributed to senior citizens. They invited senior citizens for luncheon, and our students served them. So very important. Here's another example of in New York, my high school there, the students doing a blood drive. So that they can contribute locally to the hospitals and so on. So very important examples and very proud examples that I have from my experience. Another example, some of you may be familiar with WWF. It's a World Wildlife Fund. This is an organization that tries to save the planet, endangered species, animals. So in our school, the students were raising money to help support that type of effort. So that's another example of that international mindedness type of student. So I'm almost finished with the lesson, and I want to finish with a very famous quote by Gandhi, one of the individuals that I have tremendous respect for. He basically said, "You must be the change you wish to see in the world." So it all starts with that individual. And don't think about others, but think about yourself and what you can do to become a global citizen. And finally, I'd like to end the lesson with one of my favorite videos. John Lennon's Imagine is a song that I truly love. And the lyrics, while you're watching this video, music video, think about the lyrics within this song. And I'm sure you have heard this song before. It's called the Imagine.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today.
Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace.
You might say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. Hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one.
wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger, a brotherhood of man.
So I hope you enjoyed that video. It's one of my favorite videos, and the words are so true that John Lennon talks about world without countries, and I think that's what international mindedness is all about. So I hope you enjoy that. So finally, there are some quiz questions that I want you to think about after watching this lesson. The first question is a very simple one. Being able to use more than one language is referred to as blank. And then the second question is, how is empathy different from sympathy? This was another concept that I talked to you guys about previously, so I'm sure you can answer that question. The third question is, what is cultural iceberg? And if you think about the cultural iceberg image that I shared with you before, you should be able to answer that question. The fourth question is, what are examples of IB learner profile attributes? Attributes meaning characteristics. If you remember, I talked about 10 different types of IB student attributes or characteristics. So if you can think of some of them, please, you can answer that question. And then finally, in your own word, what do you think international mindedness means? So after watching this lesson, I gave you plenty of examples and so on, and why we need international mindedness and so on. So hopefully, in your own words, describe what we mean by international mindedness. And then another task, I have the learning task, create an age-appropriate lesson plan to teach elementary school students about international mindedness to your students. So I know that most of you are thinking about becoming teachers in the future. So if you are a teacher of elementary students, what kind of lesson would you be able to deliver to your students? So think about how you might be able to do that. So finally, I want to thank JEJU National University for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts about international mindedness. I truly enjoyed this experience, sharing my ideas and so on. And I hope that you take on board the importance of international mindedness and make a difference yourselves as well. So thank you very much. 감사합니다.